Hi, my name is Austin Arter. I am the founder of the Myth Dimension, which is a social media company for authors. I'm working as a writing coach. I have worked as a freelance world builder. I've worked in bookstores. I've done a lot of stuff on the business side or in the business aspect of the writing industry. Today's video, I wanted to cover a little bit more in depth about NaNoWriMo and the fall of NaNoWriMo from a business perspective, from somebody who can analyze and look at the numbers and show you what actually went down behind the scenes. I've had to deep dive NaNoWriMo a couple of different times in research for my own company, and I wanted to preface this video by doing a little bit of a disclaimer. This is all allegedly. These are all of my own opinions and my own personal view of the events that happened at NaNoWriMo, and this is also a report based on my own research that incorporates a lot of the experience of people who worked with or for NaNoWriMo during that time, or even as users. I wanted to cover the newsletter that was sent out maybe a week ago to everybody in or who had signed up for NaNoWriMo, and then the video as well with some historical information and some events. So, without further ado, let's get started. In the newsletter, it reads, "To our NaNoWriMo community, we come to you today with sad news. After 6 years of struggling to sustain itself financially, NaNoWriMo, the nonprofit, will begin the process of shutting down. Explaining how we got here is both simple and complex. The funding woes that have threatened so many nonprofits in recent years are an unextraordinary trend. Many beloved organizations announced their closure last year. Many more are fighting for their lives. Media coverage of the financial crisis within the sector, especially among arts nonprofits, has been widespread. Yet there are ways in which NaNoWriMo is extraordinary, and reasons why we had hoped that we could buck the trend. The sheer size of our community, its global reach, and its longevity were held at impressive levels even during a tumultuous year. There was no shortage of writers who want to participate in NaNoWriMo, yet building a community and being able to sustain it are two different matters. 2024 was a revelatory year. In order to fully understand how we reached this decision and why we view it as the only alternative, we encourage you to watch this video about the state of NaNoWriMo. The video also contains some important acknowledgments and information about the logistics of our next steps. Most importantly, the video shares real data and information that the organization has not discussed previously. The plot is thicker than you might think. We recognize that the closure of NaNoWriMo represents a huge loss to the writing community, and that grief over this outcome will be exacerbated by the challenges of the past 16 months. This is not the ending that anybody wanted or planned, and believe us, if we could hit the delete button and rewrite this last chapter, we would. But we do have hope for the epilogue. What's next for NaNoWriMo, the indebted nonprofit, is much different than what's next for actual Rhymos. We hold no belief that people will stop writing 50,000 words in November and April and July, or stop seeking support for the journey that they're on. Many alternatives to NaNoWriMo popped up this year, and many people did find each other. In so many ways, it's easier than it was when NaNoWriMo began in 1999 to find your writing tribe online. They go on to say that you can recover your information if you do want to grab like word counts or kind of say your last goodbyes to somebody. They did not specify when, and in fact, when asked and probed about it, they just said generally April 2025. So that could be today, that could be in 3 weeks from now. We're not really sure when they're actually closing down, but that's kind of on trend for what NaNoWriMo does. They have cultivated this culture of silence and secrecy, especially internally, that they ironically have managed to keep quiet about until everything has now gone down and people have been able to talk a little bit more about what happened. In this newsletter, really there's maybe 2 or 3 things that really bug me. The first one, in this first chapter, in this first paragraph, the funding woes that have threatened so many nonprofits, many are fighting for their lives, the financial crisis of arts nonprofits, they want to frame it as if like they are one of many. You know, this scatter shot went out and they just got hit and they're going down with the ship, you know, oh fair maiden. And it's not really true. What is true actually is that the article that they are referencing, the arts nonprofits, yeah, they are taking a ding, but in fact, it's a 12% drop in earned revenue for arts nonprofits over a 5-year period from 2018 to 2023. which in no way matches the financial state of NaNoWriMo, especially once we get into the video. This is not something that they are a victim through no cause and effect of. This is not something that they just happen to catch a stray shot over, or they are one of many on. This is something that they did do to themselves. And I really want to preface this with the fact that there are trigger warnings in the description for things like child abuse and predators and terrorism, for a writing community nonprofit, for a charity essentially. There are things that they did willfully, or even fully neglecting, but knowing and forgetting, aiding and abetting over and over and over for nearly 7 years straight, that has driven them to this point that they are suffering more so than anybody else from their own hand, and there shouldn't be a way to help them. The second thing that they have mentioned in this article that really struck me when I first read it, and I published a video about this as a knee-jerk when I was sick, and I kind of was, exploring this for the first time and watching the video for the first time, and just the sheer incredulity that I felt. The sheer size of our community, its global reach, and its longevity held at impressive levels. There's no shortage of writers who want to participate, but in fact there were. And in fact, by their own admission, this is on the blog, in 2018, there are 287,000 participants, which they do talk about. The majority of them come from the United States, with very few that are outside of English-speaking, predominantly English-speaking countries. And really, the next couple are in Europe, which is not that far off from the American West, and then India, Brazil, the Philippines, by extremely small margins. And even more so, I believe, I'm not sure if I have it up still, maybe not. They have, oh no, I do have it up. Yeah, 67% female, about 2/3 are living in the States, barely matching the numbers that we just saw, 78% white. So even through diversity metrics of people who are in our writing community, predominantly female, almost all of them are living in the States as a white person. This is very, when we look at this, 4.5% multiracial, 5% Latin, less than 1% Middle Eastern, 5%, 6% Black. It's negligible numbers. It's really hard to support and say that you are for BIPOC creators, or really anybody who is not a white female and American. This diversity quota that they have put upon themselves and want to tote, they are basically neither global nor diverse by own admission, and they have done nothing to change that or to get further into the truth of their statement from things that they admit to in the video and in other documents. So off the bat, hitting you with two lies and trying to frame it as we used to be this whole worldwide thing that was so good for everybody everywhere. It isn't true, and they're lying to you in multiple different aspects, which is a shame, because I think that the loss of NaNoWriMo, not as an organization but as a community, is genuinely devastating. I remember when I joined up in 2018, being able to walk into a mall and see somebody. I saw somebody in the cafeteria who had a sticker of the NaNoWriMo sticker on their laptop, who was doing a sprint in the mall cafeteria, and having that moment of recognition where we saw each other and we were both able to do a sprints, on the spot, was incredible. It was a different kind of connectivity among writers, where you don't really talk to many writers outside of your very small circle, and there's very, very few in-person chances to talk to people who understand your goals or your inner life the way that you do. And it really is a shame that NaNoWriMo, of all people, of all companies, was responsible for that. It feels guilty, it feels like being having met your best friends as fans of a band that ended up becoming abusers, and it's genuinely pretty on par for what happened here. in the video that was published, and I'm sure I'm about to watch an ad about it, I want to go through a couple of different things with things that they talk about in the video. We talk about financial context and financial crisis. This video is headed by Kilby Blades, who is the interim executive director of NaNoWriMo, basically the CEO as a translation. And here in the NaNoWriMo financials, as she's talking about in the video, NaNoWriMo operated at a book deficit for four of the past 6 years. A $150,000 relief loan was taken out during the pandemic, and without this loan, the org would have operated at a loss for additional years. Now, it's important to note, they have operated at basically a net loss on paper, regardless of the relief loan. Kind of in a Caleb Hammer-esque way. This was something that they got the bailout, but their behavior did not change. And I want to draw attention to, in the annual spend here, the $1.3 million of budgeting and spending and expenditure versus and again, not small numbers, not a small margin, net negative, hundreds of thousands of dollars, nearly $200,000 in 2022 is insane. This is something where this is 6 years, possibly even 7 years. We don't have the document for 2024 just yet. To have 7 years of negative numbers on a nonprofit isn't there's no adaptation or change to the budget. They don't rework their revenue systems. It is something that is, kind of appalling. You don't have an excuse, especially when, so for example, in NaNoWriMo, there were these people called municipal liaisons. They were kind of local leaders. So for example, in your small town, maybe that these municipal liaisons who were volunteers for NaNoWriMo could host in-person writing events for their writing sprints, April, June, and November. MLs, the short form for what that is, they were expected to run these in-person events out of pocket. They paid themselves to do it. NaNoWriMo did not give them any money to do it. Not only that, but in order to be an ML, it was mandatory to have a kickoff party and a midway party, so 2 parties in 1 month, with at least 1 weekly write-in. At least 1 weekly write-in. So you are asking somebody as a volunteer to pay out of pocket and mandating them that they must have a kickoff party, a midway party with weekly write-ins that you will host on your own dollar. And yet, even though they have 800 volunteers and 12 employees at NaNoWriMo, we're seeing net negative nearly $200,000. And I'm sure in 2024 it was absolutely insane. At this part in the video, I also wanted to touch on another really fun thing to kind of kick it off. I'm not sure about when this happened, but I do know that it is true. Allegedly, it is true. They were so stressed for finances, I believe this is 2022, that they did a double up donation weekend in which they, were asking for donations in exchange for increased goodies. So you could have a discount on merch, or they would send you extra merch, something like that. Over the weekend, they sent reportedly between 8 and 11 emails asking for donations over the course of 48 hours. So 10 emails, 5 emails a day, every day, to everybody in NaNoWriMo over the course of 48 hours. They created graphics that encouraged people living in poverty to just donate less than expected. We won't be mad at you. And that people who are just making $12,000 a year could afford a $300 yearly donation. They did this with mostly targeted to people who were impoverished, because writers notoriously are not the most well-paid group. We're not exactly doctors. And it was kind of appalling to see it at the time. Not only that, but they actually posted these double up donation weekend solicitations in the Young Writers Program, which is a program for people who want to compete in NaNoWriMo who are of the ages 13 to 17. They encourage the minors, 13 to 17 years old, to buy and donate merchandise. In fact, they encourage them to use their mom's credit card to do so, because, legally, a kid can't have PayPal. PayPal doesn't accept minors because that's a legal no-no for many, many reasons that you as a smart person might be able to comprehend. They've also done crazy things with receiving sponsorships over the course of this time, such as from a predatory vanity press. A vanity press is basically a publishing house that expects authors to pay up front in order to, publish or market or print run their books. Which is not good. If you are an author and you do have a book, you should never pay anybody for anything except for maybe an editor or a book cover artist. You should be majority getting paid by a publishing house, especially by a publishing house. There should be no monthly costs. You should not have to pay anything up front. A publishing company buys your rights from you. Either your print rights or your copyright. Sometimes your movie rights if you were that good. But this is, a predatory vanity press. Not great. It was called Inkit. Toted around by the old executive director named Grant Faulkner. They loved him. And it took quite a lot of community shouting, really, to try and get them to stop partnering with Inkit and letting Inkit prey on authors. The second one, which is most notable, most recent as well, was the AI scandal, which I'm going to cover in just a second. At this part in the video, I believe, we have the expense breakdown. This is the, again, 2018 to 2023 average, and remember, this was $1.3 million in yearly budget, an average of $850,000 per year. Going to staff payroll and benefits, $910,000 by 2023. We can only imagine how much it was in 2024. An average of $185,000 per year in merchandise fulfillment expenses, which they did end up covering. No investment in our core program asset, the NaNoWriMo website, and they even have this little red note that's in the bottom corner of the video. This staff to program expense ratio is uncommon. This one, to me, is deeply upsetting. This is deeply upsetting to me for a number of reasons. $1 million out of the $1.3 million that they have budgeted is going towards 12 people that they have on staff. I don't believe I have the document up yet, or up anymore, but I've looked over all of their Form 990s, which is kind of their legal IRS tax information that they have to publish every year. They had around 12 employees total, paid employees. Their executive director and the right-hand man makes about six figures, is $120,000 a year. Even at 12 employees, all of the employees are making 80 grand plus a year, 80 grand plus on average. And I'm not against anybody being paid a livable wage, or in fact, I like when companies who are able to pay out more to their employees do so, because I believe that everybody should have a really, really great time financially, and I would love to be able to do that someday as well. But when you have a $1.3 million budget, and you're setting aside $1 million to pay myself first, but then the core program, which is the foundation of the actual business that you are running, of the nonprofit that you are running, you have 3%, and then technology, which is another really, really big one that you have no reinvestment into, is 5%. You should maybe take a look at yourself. You are budgeting $50,000 a year, every year, out of a $1.3 million budget to go to the two core things that allow you to have a business, and then you wonder why, you have negative numbers in the bank account. And in fact, this is something where people talked about in, I think, 2018 or 2019, their really significant last expense was when they upgraded the website that had not been upgraded since around 2007. So we are 10 years deep. We have not upgraded the website. It is very, very janky. It's very, very glitchy. And people wanted the upgrade. They fussed about it. And NaNoWriMo was really heartbroken and be like, it's really taking it out of us. We don't have the money. They managed to fork it up. They had a 2-month turnaround on actually putting the website out into the world. and it still wasn't good. People lost data. People weren't able to sign in. It was worse for people with disabilities. People were reporting that they couldn't see what was going on, especially people with vision problems, because of the contrast. Like, it was a mess, a disaster. And since then, I have said they keep reminding you through this video, through press releases that they've done in the past. We so badly wanted to upgrade the website. We so badly wanted to upgrade the website. We should have done this. We just don't have the money. We don't have the money. I want to point out two things. One, the $1 million that you're paying yourself first, and then you're only budgeting $50,000. Yeah, you can't do it. You're only planning on maintenance. You need to actually plan and possibly save up, or even take out, I don't know, extra loans or crowdfund a advancement in upgrading the website, or I don't know, doing the program that allows you to have a job tomorrow. Number two, my favorite thing, this is their office that they used to have. It was, I think, the Office of Lights and Letters. This is where they used to stay. Of course, a very, very nice building. This was their HQ. This is in Berkeley, California. I have it that they were spending in around $36,000 a year on rent at this location. $36,000 a year, Berkeley, California. It's it's a very like public metro, North Cal, I think North Cal area for their location. Not a crazy expense. An HQ, it is what it is. You need a place to run out of house. But what's great is that in 2022, when they were at the height of making, I think they were, let's see, and then here, bunk. Yeah, so like 2021, they have the extra money because they still have the COVID relief loan that they need to pay back, and you see this numbers going down. All of a sudden, this quick ka-chunk into $180,000 that are out the window, yet we don't have an upgrade on the website. We don't have any change to programs. There's been nothing. What happened? They bought a new place. They bought a new HQ. This one is about $55,000 a year. So again, they not having any money to pay any of their volunteers, to hire more staff, to hire a full-time programmer or an engineer, software engineer, or anything like that, or even enough money to pay back their loan. They spent an extra $20,000 a year on buying a new HQ. Not sure what was wrong with the last one. Seems pretty clean. Doesn't seem to be any like leaks or anything like that. But you want to know what? Maybe all those people that you left, that left you in 2022 and 2023 when Kilby Blades joined up as president, or at least became more and more integral into the team. Maybe mandated a $20,000 a year rent boost in which you had to buy the whole third floor of the building. There's no units on the third floor that I could find, so it leads me to assume that they own the whole third floor. Again, baseline $55,000 a year at the old place, $36,000 a year. So that's crazy. But yeah, you want to know what? This number, it was worth it, we'll say. It was really, really worth it for you to run a completely online nonprofit. Extremely, extremely useful. So in November of 2023, NaNoWriMo talks about some major issues that happened. Namely, the NaNoWriMo board receives two major complaints during National Novel Writing Month, which is staff mishandling of a child endangerment accusation about a volunteer, and then staff misconduct on the NaNoWriMo forums. The board, as they said, launched an immediate investigation upon hearing this and shared its findings publicly within 10 days. Immediate changes were ordered by the board, leadership, and other staff, and then a detailed remediation plan committed to by the board. And I wanted to go into a little bit more detail of what they're talking about here. And I guess at first I want to read this. So, in detail with the child safety, and I recommend clicking pretty far ahead if you wanted to skip this part. Neither staff nor volunteers had been background checked. No staff or volunteers had ever taken the state-mandated child safety training. No volunteers have ever filled out formal applications about their legal information. There was a concern about the level of access the volunteers had to user data. The Young Writers Program, the WYP website, gave anybody the ability to just create an educator account, call themselves a teacher, and then invite children to join their classroom. There was little to no programmatic oversight of adult-child interactions in the YWP, and numerous practices on NaNoWriMo all stemmed from our policy of all ages spaces needed rework. So what had happened was there was a moderator on the forums who I believe was, he was responsible for, his name was Moderator X. He was kind of the head of one of the bigger threads on the YWP forums, which was the Christian Teens Together, which was not like entirely Christian nor teens. It was mostly minors, again, 13 to 17. And it turns out that this moderator had been inappropriately messaging minors on the platform, guiding them to like a third-party Discord that was like not the NaNoWriMo's official Discord, which did not exist for a long time. The moderator X was a frequenter of r/ABDL, which is Adult Baby Diaper Lovers, was convincing these kids to go to a site that was in this fetish group and was interacting with these kids as like a role play fashion as part of this fetish. This was the bigger one. There have been multiple reports and scandals around moderators who were inappropriately interacting with children, were encouraging children to write erotica with them in in-person events, things like that. This was mostly shunned by NaNoWriMo for a long time. In fact, they did know about it, they knew about it, and have admitted to knowing about it, but chose to do nothing with it because they did not want to touch the issue. It went on for a long time. It became sort of a bullying ring in which more moderators, more people who were authority figures on the website bandwagoned onto bullying kids, harassing kids. There was blatant racism, homophobia, ableism across the forums that were brought up to the moderators of YWP and even to the board of Nano itself, and yet nothing happened. It was kind of this culture where to be an aggressor or to be a victim, both parties are guilty, and the best policy is general peace, and that if you had been in a conflict of any kind, then there's no good conflict. Moderators were known for coming towards the end of a conflict during its resolution, saving the day and taking ownership of all of the remediation that had happened, often punishing both the victim and the abuser, but never so severely as to actually, suspend the accounts that were being blatantly homophobic towards children, or, slinging horrible insults, being blatantly racist, or anything else. It was mostly just a, hey, don't do that, slap on the wrist. That's not very nice that was happening. This got so extreme that a couple of minors from the platform had to create a speak out card, which is a like an anonymous publication kind of thing. It's like a simple card in which they talked about how horrible their experience had been with YWP and Nano, how many of their peers had suffered at the hands of moderators, not only those abusive entities. The Moderator X thing came to light, and they even had testimonials of from their peers, from other minors, of their experience interacting with minors publicly and privately, and all of the aggressive entities that existed within the site. In the same breath, the group of minors who created this card and were suffering the most not only published this card and sent it to the board of NaNoWriMo, they also sent the evidence that they had gotten for the amount of child abuse that was being done by Moderator X and other entities to the FBI. In this video, Kilby says that upon receiving their end of the report, they contacted the FBI. It's unclear which one came first, or if either are true. I'm leaning towards saying that maybe the children who had to fess up their content to the FBI are telling the truth over, Kilby and Nano, which took now almost an extra 8 months to talk about their share, or not even 8 months, sorry, 16 months to talk about what happened on their end of this deal. But in either direction, we now have this this summary of events that was pretty horrible. Child negligence of, child safety as a whole, leading directly to there being victims minor victims on the website under Nano's watch that Nano did not know about and did not do anything. Upon this coming out, it took, in fact, 2 months before anything happened. What had happened was that people were speaking out more and more on the Nano forums to, shed light on the fact that, hey, children are being abused. And Nano's response, immediate action, was to shut down the forums, thereby silencing all of the kids, but also so that they could investigate, cover everything up, is basically what the communities took it as. That was generally the vibe, and that was what was talked about in back-end channels, was that this was more of a step to cover up so that no journalists could go snooping. At this point, 2 months later, the FBI is now investigating Nano because of child endangerment, child predators, sexual assault, multiple different instances. They ask Nano for the information for Moderator X and all of the other moderators of the site. The NaNoWriMo, the board, because they had never made anybody file a formal application with any kind of legal information, like phone number or address or, first name, last name, even a middle name, nothing. They could not provide any information. And they even admit it themselves in this video that because they had no legal information, they could not provide any information that would be helpful to the FBI while they were under investigation for child endangerment and sexual abuse. And that is part of their long history in abusing minors. There were multiple instances, like this one was during or on top of soliciting minors for donations in order to help out their, poor donation scheme. It was generally a fucking disaster. Really, really bad. This was maybe the largest scandal that they had faced so far. We skip ahead a little bit to, I believe it was 12:30.
Did you know that you
watch this ad really quick? This is more on mismanagement. I wanted to cover this a little bit more. So up to this point, again, they had done all of the horrible sponsorship things that they'd done with hiring predatory vanity presses, encouraging AI, which I suppose I should go into now in this one as well, and the child endangerment stuff. On top of all of those things happening, they had additional challenges. They were not compliant in workforce practices that required them to spend $20,000 and 4 months working with a labor attorney to remediate. They found in their investigation that they had a level of financial crisis that had not been previously apparent. They had flawed assumptions in cash flow projections and a discovery of liabilities that were not accounted for in board documentation. There are miscellaneous issues that required significant time, like, Shopify to a new platform, switching banks. But even in my opinion, the most damning, the knowledge transfer from departing staff, that gap is ironic. So at this point, things are really changing in Q1, Q2 of 2024. We have fully felt the fallout of child endangerment cases and FBI investigations coming forward in the middle of peak 2023 NaNoWriMo season. They definitely felt the hit. And in finding this, finding out, wow, we don't do any background checks. We don't do any legal paperwork. We never have. We don't force any state mandated, illegal to not, state mandated child safety training. They decided to catch up on the speed on that. What Kilby frequently doesn't mention in this video is what her role is in all of this, especially in her negative connotation. At this point, Kilby Blades tried to hire a background check company that was being investigated by the IRS for lying on documentation. To my knowledge, that didn't go through. I wonder why. But that was Kilby's choice, was to hire a background check company that was being investigated by the IRS. Not only that, but Kilby Blades has now stepped down because of her role on the forums, where she was in charge of the forums and as president of the board. She was put up on the forums to answer questions. She reportedly from the community proceeded to do nothing but complain about us wanting the forums, and basically went cold turkey for 4 weeks and then closed the forums. Then proceeded with the fake positive crap in January with one new post that closed from them and no open forums. Although their new post suggests that this person is now former, the NaNoWriMo is now former, it's probably because they weren't good at all. Under this role of leading the forums, Kilby Blades was kind of doing this Q&A on behalf of like, hey, community's kind of under shock and fire. We need somebody who's like a trusted personality to speak, on behalf of the company to the people who were using our product, and they chose Kilby Blades. Kilby Blades was not really a fan of the community or the forum online. She had a long-standing history with blatantly and outwardly supporting AI. People felt very taken off guard by her because Kilby Blades, of course, is not her real name, but she got that name after her best friend died in the early 2000s when they were in their early 20s, and took first name, last name, Kilby Blades from her dead friend to use as her writer name to then write erotica. Doesn't want to share her legal information or legal first name or legal last name, because she wants to keep, of course, her writing and her work separate, which is strange why she carried her pen name into work and legal documentation, but that's, I guess, not my business. So Kilby wasn't really off to a good start, having like an AI profile picture that she's been toting around since the early 2020s, and generally being pretty alienistic towards the community. Didn't really rub people the right way. Very vitriolic. At this point, while on the forums, she talks about how when she wants to do NaNoWriMo, what she does is that through the money that she made selling widgets and traveling around Europe as a blogger, she just kind of goes on a writing retreat. She goes back to the lake house, or she books a flight to Italy, and there she does her NaNoWriMo. And she recommended that as an alternative to the forums, which a lot of people felt was tone deaf, considering 800 volunteers that run the show behind the 12 employees are completely unpaid, are expected to pay out of profit, and are often under the poverty level, something that NaNoWriMo clearly recognizes, considering they were making graphics, begging donations, e-begging, for people who were below the poverty line, which was their own audience. And yet, knowing all of this information, Kilby said, hey, if you don't have a space in real life to go do writing, go to France about it. If you're not feeling very inspired and you feel like you're stuck chronically online because you just can't afford time or space or energy or money to, go outside, touch grass, what I like to do is I like to go to Rome, and that kind of helps me. And that was her take on it. People didn't like that very much, and things got pretty shaky, at which she then closed down the forums entirely to avoid the negative comments. And this has been reported at about the point in which her haunches got up, and she became very aggressive, very violent with how she conducted herself in the business, with the team, and in the community. She took everything as an insult, and things got really, really shaky. Now, by report, she apparently became former. She says that she resigned from the board. There are other instances and wordings that I found that kind of allude to the idea that she was maybe fired for, doing that. Not really sure. In any case, Grant Faulkner and a couple of other people have now stepped down, having now realized how horrible the paperwork is on a failing company that is being investigated by the FBI for child safety and endangerment. Not fantastic, and everybody's leaving. At this point, Kilby Blades resigns as a interim executive director to head the company in the exchange. This is also at the point where her involvement in the company has reportedly led to over 9 out of the 12 people who were left in NaNoWriMo leaving. That is what was made apparent by people who were keeping up with the staffing list that was published on NaNoWriMo, but has since gone down. People who it seems to be reflected on their legal forms, which Kilby Blades, by the way, a pen name. Kilby Blades was filling out legal documentation and legal paperwork with her pen name, which is a felony. And then again, that information comes out, forms get shut down. A lot of stuff is going on. Basically, Kilby Blades takes over. People are not very happy about it. Everybody leaves, including staff. Nobody wants to work with Kilby. Afterwards, nobody, leaves a post-it note on what their password was or how to, do the things that they were doing. So they have to then hire all new people and try and retrain even more people. And it's a hell of a show. It is a hell of a show. I want to point out a couple of other things that were going on with Mismanagement that they don't really talk about. I believe, yeah. So this is the number of the drop in participation, and you can see here 122,000 people to about 97,000 people in participants, which doesn't actually reflect what they told us in 2018. So that's kind of weird, but apparently this is the actual number of event participation and sponsorships. Again, this is not, it's, what is that, 25,000 people left? 25,000 people left over a 6-year period. Not crazy, but you're still hovering around this 100,000 user mark. The amount of winners goes down. That could just be state of the game. The amount of people who are actually physically able to complete the word count in a month. That could be anything from people just needing to go to work to not being as motivated. I've definitely noticed a lack in new authorship in the last little bit, because I started freelancing as a world builder, I think around 2020, 2019-ish, and this kind of matches my experience as well. What they don't talk about here is that in 2017, they leave out 2017 as like a notable figure or a notable number, which is strange because they talk about how their troubles started in 2018 but provide no control group. And I think that this is a cover-up on something that had happened in 2017 that they pushed out under the rug. So in 2017, the staff decided to roll out an in-office game that they had apparently been playing among themselves. They wanted to roll it out to the wider public. This game was a treasure hunt type activity where one had to stop a terrorist named Ivan the Icy from blowing up Nano in the world. This hunt included a now removed video of a very convincingly dressed man monologuing at a camera about how he was going to bomb Nano. Several fake emails were sent out to users that eventually led to a hidden page on the website where you had to disarm a bomb. Failing to do so would make it explode. It was heavily implied that if you did it right, you would disarm it, but spoiler alert, the bomb could not be disarmed and exploded no matter what you did. It exploded out penguins, but the participant hadn't been told that, just that it was a bomb that would explode no matter what you did. They, apparently, having been playing this game around the office, thought it would be a really fun thing to roll out in 2017, November-ish. This was not communicated to MLs prior to sending out. Nothing had been mentioned. And in fact, MLs were the ones who raised the alarm and contacted HQ. explained in detail the potential ramifications of dressing up somebody like a terrorist, giving him a Russian name, and saying that, and sending out frequent emails and videos saying that he was going to bomb everybody. The wonderful thing, yeah, this was September, September 2017. This video featuring a terrorist called Ivan the Icy, who was threatening to bomb everybody, was published to NaNoWriMo's, or published to the internet on 9/11. On 9/11. This was the year after the bombing in Brussels during Nano. This was 2 years after the bombings and shootings in Paris that actually had the Parisian Rhymos, like the local writing group, stuck in a write-in near the bomb site and the active shooter for hours on end. This was the same year that a bomb was detonated in the Manchester Arena, and this was almost immediately after the London Bridge terrorist attack, which had people, NaNoWriMo users, people who were writing in Rhymos, pulling people out of the rubble of the London Bridge terrorist attack. This was immediately after. This was also something that on the Young Writers program, shock and awe, they're targeting children. NaNoWriMo published to the Young Writers program. Those participants all got messages from Nano under the name of Ivan the Icy, who was threatening terrorist acts unless the participants could follow the clues to the email to various internet sites like YouTube. Now, if you actually Google NaNoWriMo Ivan the Icy, you won't really find anything. I read some testimonials claiming that Nano went so far as to pay online moderator bonuses for deleting and banning any post or any user that wanted to talk about the fake terrorist attack, and this entire thing was swept under the rug. I have not found any pictures of what Ivan the Icy looked like. I can't find any deleted videos. Only people who were there and went through this thing and remember it in pretty extreme detail, considering, you have people who are actively going through real life crises and bombings that are all using your platform, and then you decide to roll out a game that you've been playing around the office to the wider public, in which you hunt down a terrorist called Ivan the Icy on 9/11. Right after multiple bombings, because 2017 was a horrible year. I don't know if you guys remember that. I remember that. That was a horrible, horrible time. So they were doing that as well. And not only that, they skipping a little bit farther ahead as well. Kilby, I believe, when she was starting as a interim executive director, she fired all of the MLs and had to them reapply and with a new document in which, kind of like Cat in the Hat, apparently she had multiple attorneys that on her end that were looking over the contract and making it pretty predatory towards the MLs, and the MLs weren't allowed to disagree with it, and it was basically sign the dotted line or leave was the sentiment. Again, very harsh, not very co-worky or casual, or this is for the love of the community or anything else that you would expect from a nonprofit. It was pretty sucky for people who had dedicated years of their lives and thousands of dollars and hours of man time to be manpower to just be shunned and cut off and targeted. Not fantastic, not cool, man. She also implemented diversity workshops that were held in her. There were 2 workshops held the year that they were brought in, and then those same workshops were used in following years. Not just the same discussion or presenter, the actual workshops themselves. That MLs were required to go over them again each and every year, which a lot of people just didn't do because they already had gone through the same training. Again, 2 workshops, they recorded and then just re-recorded them in classic HR fashion for any big, any huge, conglomerate. If you've ever done those training videos, yeah. So they basically did that. Again, this is something that they paid $20,000. They themselves were going through remediation with a labor law lawyer, which again, for us who are unemployed, if we saw like a labor lawyer show up at work, we know that there's going to be so much drama, and our manager is finally going to get what's coming to him. it's it is not a, oh, thank God they're here to make us better. It's they finally got called out on their shit. So the fact that they had a 4-month workshop to do this says a lot, I think. So that was her first order of business. She also put in place language barriers, and I did say that one right. She said that the source material from which that Nano was publishing cannot be translated into foreign languages because she was worried about mistranslation or being misheard. In which people said, wow, well, what about us who hold, writing workshops abroad for Nano? She said, well, you guys can learn English or use Google Translate. And that was official documents that were sent out. That was an actual email. Those were real messages, allegedly. I've never seen them. But apparently to people who were MLs, that was the response, was, well, your people can use Google Translate. Good luck, Godspeed. So, again, this global nonprofit with a wide and ranging community that is running real strong, predominantly white, predominantly female in the United States of America, probably of a certain financial demographic as well, is not allowing their source material to be translated out of English. And if anybody has a language barrier that they would like to bring up to the front of the class, use Google Translate about it. If you don't like that, sign in. You can fuck off. Was essentially the sentiment that Kilby Blades was bringing to the table. Again, 2017 we do not see. That was Ivan the Icy, possibly the last year that we had any good numbers for them, that they refused to show. Who knows if they've actually been negative longer? It could have been negative longer. We don't know. 2018, year over year, exponential loss. Same thing as like the money and the financial aspect. I knew it. And I can't these ads are everywhere. Same thing as the financial aspect. Like, this is holding these numbers concurrent with the actual amount of users that were leaving. You can't convince me that having 20,000 people leave, which is maybe 1/6 of your total user base, is a $200,000 chunk. A $200,000 chunk from 1/6 of your user base just not being around anymore is appalling and insane. But also, of course, doesn't account for the necessary $20,000 upgrade to getting a new HQ and a new fancier office, or the bonuses that they paid out to themselves, by the way. They've been giving themselves, on average, I think $4,000 in bonuses and in salary increases for the last few years. I think from 2018 till about 2023, Grant Faulkner ended up tacking on an extra $20,000 onto his salary. And when anybody confronted him, or confronted NaNoWriMo, the board, about, hey, why are you paying him $120,000 a year as the leader of a nonprofit of 12 people when you have $1.3 million in funding and we don't have a new website and we're not allowed to ask you for money for programs and you don't have any events and you're not updating the website? And you're not doing anything new, and you're not, innovating any sort of features or anything like that, why pay him? They would get defensive and they would ban the users, which is not, that's what you do as a nonprofit, obviously. So what about all other alternatives? They say here, we were in serious talks about a merger with another writing organization. They didn't want to take on our 6-figure debt. We were ill-positioned to seek emergency funding because the organization did not have audited financial documents, table stakes for many grant applications. We heard repeatedly from other would-be grassroots supporters that they aligned with NaNoWriMo as an organization, but that the community vitriol was the problem. Numerous AI players approached us with offers of sponsorship, but we turned down most of them because they didn't align to our mission. And the hope was that the community would come through and support us when we were transparent about the organization's financial problems, but that didn't happen. We were in serious talks about a merger with another writing organization. They didn't want to take on our 6-figure debt. I'd hate to say it. This is something that really, really bugged me. All companies have debt. All companies have debt. Coca-Cola has debt. If you want to, you can name any of your favorite companies on the planet. They have debt. They have debt. They have a lot of money in the bank, but they have debt. Debt, as we know, billionaires and millionaires love to use as leverage. That is something that is a given in business, is that you will have unpaid loans. Facebook probably has unpaid loans. Facebook probably has unpaid loans. That's just something that is normal in business. And yet, for all of the mergers that we see, we never see anything about taking on debt. I don't think that this was real. I think that this is about as real as like, oh, you want to hang out on Friday? I'm probably going to be sick that day. That's probably what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to get out politely and easily, and they gave NaNoWriMo a fake excuse, especially with Kilby at the head trying to negotiate this merger. Not wanting to take on six-figure debt, I want to paint this picture in a different way. You have 100,000 competitors that are showing up every November to compete, and you have around 25,000 to 30,000 people who are crossing that finish line. You are getting $1.3 million in funding from revenue, from donations, a lot of different areas of life. This is something that, on paper, is a good deal. Even if you were buying the company and you were going to be losing $1 million out the get-go, because they are negative, it's not a profitable nonprofit. They're not even breaking even. To be able to assume the community as another writing organization, imagine if a Macmillan or a Simon and Schuster bought this. That would be a killer deal. That would be so good that all they have to do is just buy, basically at a loss, the sheer component of the site, all the community stuff, and kind of like the name, right? It's pennies on the dollar. And yes, they're taking over the six-figure debt, but for a Macmillan who's worth like $100 million or more, yeah, of course we want to take you on. Which is like, even like, think of a Dragonsteel. If Dragonsteel could just start where NaNoWriMo was, and Brandon Sanderson could just implement and grow Dragonsteel in that direction, or do that merger, even they're only making maybe $10-30 million, only $10 million, but like, even for a six-figure debt, like it would be kind of like a step backwards, but it might be worth it. Because there is value in community. There is value in that writing organization. People were saying for many, many years, it became this Google phenomenon where people were like, oh, are you doing nano this year? Oh, I'm a nano kind of, you know what I mean? Like, this was something that was so ingrained in the vocabulary of an author. It was so widespread. Every author knows about nano. Brandon Sanderson competed in nano. For this to go down is insane. Is wild. Only one other writing organization apparently they chose to talk into a merger with. They did not once you are now talking about a merger and it falls through, why not re-up and pitch to other people? Again, people would be willing to take a loss. Companies are willing to take a loss on a company just to absorb what they currently are and adopt the community. Even if you lose 50,000 people in the community, you are still left with 50,000 people in the community. You are left with 50,000 people who have shown to be forking over about $1 million a year. Okay, all right, that might be, I don't know, worth the $300,000 in debt that you got. To me, that looks like a good deal. They did not choose to speak with any other writing organizations. They just took the one. We were also ill-positioned to seek emergency funding because the organization did not have audited financial statements. They did not have audited financial statements. They did not have any legal paperwork. They did not have any applications with legal names of volunteers. They had been mis-signing and mistreating other legal documentations with the IRS for years. And now they do not have audited financial statements, which made them redundant on grant applications. This is something that I think maybe you should fire your accountant over, which might have helped with that, $130,000 overage you have a year in budget spending. Ironically, it feels like, and it seems like, the admittance is we don't have a filing cabinet, and worse yet, we're still learning how to use Microsoft Excel. As a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that has been functional since 1999, and I believe that they got their ruling year, the year that they were made a nonprofit, was like 2008. They've been rocking so long that they were right there with it with Tumblr. They were going so long that they were there for the beginning of the internet when we were told don't go on group like chat sites. There are weird, strange men on there who are preying on children. They were there. They were a functional business making six figures or more during that era. And yet now we have no audited financial statements. They are unable to seek extra funding. They are under attack from the FBI because of child endangerment. And they are now blaming their community as being too mean to them and not giving them enough donations, which is something that they also cover later in the same video. We heard repeatedly from other would-be grassroots supporters, other would-bes, other fakers, other wannabes, that they wanted to aligned with NaNoWriMo as an organization, but the community vitriol was a problem. Basically, if you guys weren't so mean to us, we would have gotten paid. I'll tell you right now, NaNoWriMo as an organization on paper, it is a community that is for the development of creativity and the mission of allowing authors or encouraging authors to finish their novel. Everybody knows that. NaNoWriMo as an organization is to build a community of authors that like finishing novels. That's the organization. They speak it in a little bit more fluffier words on their 990 forums. They speak it in a little bit more fluffier terms on their website, but that is what we know Nano to be. You want my opinion? I, Austin Arter, as part of the Myth Dimension, agree with and align with NaNoWriMo as an organization. That makes complete sense. I like the idea of a community that gathers authors together for the purpose of writing a novel. That's pretty in line with what I do too. I also align with Nano. Do I like Nano, the people who are behind it? No. And the community vitriol being a problem is because you neglected them. You directly dismissed their safety. Again, anybody could sign up and be an educator for the Young Writers Program. You didn't have to provide any sort of stake. There's no skin in the game. Don't provide your legal name and address. Don't go through this state-mandated safety training course. Out the window. If you want to sign up for NaNoWriMo and have kids be with you privately, one-on-one, unmoderated in a secondary location, physically in person, that's totally fine with us because we're NaNoWriMo. And people spoke out about that. And they were silenced. The forums got taken down. People were banned. People got dismissed from NaNoWriMo. People were excommunicated from the group. MLs were fired by NaNoWriMo within the span of days, which was shorter than them actually responding to child endangerment cases or them responding to all of the things that they saw as hurtful to their bottom line. They were never for the community. They were acting in a for-profit fashion, in a very late capitalist fashion, and they still managed to come up negative year over year because they did not align to the one person, the one demographic that would have saved them, which was their community, the people that they foster. I was talking with a friend about this the other day where I was like, look, when was the last time that you saw a bad person who liked somebody like Jacksepticeye? Or like people who are generally non-problematic? Non-problematic people tend to have other non-problematic people around them. If you have a community that is known for vitriol and hatred and aggression, that might be reflective on you. I don't know of a lot of people who are, have developed these aggressive cesspools of the internet that are being helmed by genuine gems of people. That doesn't really happen. You might find that in like fandoms when they devolve, but that is about it. And this, again, deflection of ownership, this like passing of the torch of, it wasn't us, it was everybody else. It wasn't us, that's just what happens to arts nonprofits. It's not us, it was our community vitriol that was the problem. That is childish and disgusting and completely discounts all of the things that they should have taken ownership of to begin with. Ivan the Icy, child endangerment, the AI problems, the problems on the forums, not in reinvesting into their own programs again and again and again and again. Numerous AI players approached us with offers of sponsorship, but we turned down most of them. Not all of them, just most of them. And this reads like a 70% of them we didn't agree with. We don't like them. And in the video, she even says, like AI doesn't align to what her mission is. But they didn't turn down all of them. We turned down most of them. Numerous is a specific word. Numerous isn't many. Numerous isn't a few. Numerous isn't a couple. Numerous is like a variety. Numerous is many. Numerous is many. We turned down most of them. Most of them, not all of them. And most of them, again, to me, feels like a 70-30 split. I don't know if that is... I don't know if they really... Because as far as we know, I think they only aligned with maybe 2-3 AI players that ended up giving them money. They could have taken on more that they just never told us about, and they just kind of behind the scenes took the money out of ChatGPT. It is not outside of the realm of possibility, and again, this is speculation, that Nano could come out and say that they have gotten money significantly from something like ChatGPT in exchange for user data. That is now not beyond the realm of possibility due to the track record that NaNoWriMo has, especially under the helm or with the help of Kilby. There was a hope that the community would come through and support us. When we were transparent about the organization's financial problems, that didn't happen. Again, I saw this term where Kilby and the community, or Kilby and like the team at Nano have this lacquer of privilege, and I haven't been able to get that term out of my head, and I think that it's really fitting. They have this lacquer of privilege that makes them feel slimy and also makes them really, really hard to take seriously, where in this case, it really does feel like, well, I asked my dad for money, and he said no. After the 4th time of crashing my BMW, it was time for me to take responsibility for my own life. That is really hard to take serious. We thought that we would just tell you guys that we were financially floundering for the last 7 years because we refused to give you guys everything, but instead paid ourselves $1 million every year for 7 years. And we figured once we told you guys, hey, we're in desperate need of help because we significantly misspend the millions of dollars that you already give us, we figured that you would just kind of come through and support us. One last hurrah for the fellas. And that didn't happen. Again, if a community vitriol wasn't a problem, and if you guys actually bailed us out for the millionth time, we wouldn't be in this situation. But that didn't happen. And that's why we're here today. That's why all of this stuff keeps happening. And it just kind of sucks, man. I'm trying to find, there was something that they I believe they had future planning. That was the AI document. They had NaNoWriMo.org/impact. Their future planning that they were talking about when they wanted to create new programs, that when they were like, if we could just stay open for one more year, they were going to hire like a dedicated engineer that was going to be able to help them with a lot of stuff. Their method of being able to afford to do that, they doubled their own budget to $2.5 million. And on the website as well, even I think in 2025, it might still be open. It shows that it is now increased from 1.3 to 2.5. And they wanted to do a full-scale redesign of their website due to a lack of key features. So what their solution was like, wow, our community really hates that we don't do anything for them. We're going to ask them for double the amount of money so that we can continue to pay ourselves the exact same amount, but then do a full-scale redesign because of the lack of key features that we haven't been able to put in the last 15 years and that we missed in 2018. And there's a part of me that is always going to wonder if they didn't buy a $55,000 a year HQ with their COVID relief loan, if we would have gotten that website. There's going to be a piece of me that thinks, wow, if Kilby didn't re-sign for an unspecified amount of money on a 6-month contract, I wonder how much money they would have just put towards fixing the website. There are many things that happened over the course of NaNoWriMo's run. Again, Ivan the Icy, numerous child endangerment, legal malpractice, financial malpractice, gross negligence, gross mismanagement. NaNoWriMo wants you to think that they have, this was just a sign of the times and this was an apocalyptic event and they just got clipped by the biggest boulder. And this was something that they didn't know was going to happen and they didn't see it coming and they hoped that the community would save them and they didn't. And it's floundering. It's a floundering privileged boomer that is attempting to ask you for money that you don't have so that they can pay themselves more, so that they can mismanage the money that you are giving in good faith. They continually poisoned themselves, did nothing to remediate or remedy the whole situation. This is a pattern of behavior. If they had kept the lights on any longer, they would have just kept doing it. They would have done it a million times over. They would have abused you. They would have allowed the abuse of many of their other users. There are no promises and no course of action and no pattern of action that could have promised that they would have been better in the long run, because despite being forgiven by the community and using their community as scapegoats, getting financial bailouts, asking a 13-year-old for a $300 a year donation, they simply can't give what they're saying that they can. They cannot. They were not able to. They had it coming. This doesn't even cover the numerous things that Nano has done. They have done more, and there is more detail. I know that there's another video. I think her name is Savy Books by Savy. That is like a 2-hour documentary breakdown on this topic. I really highly recommend going there. It's a fantastic video. I'll link it in the description. Do your own research. Talk to the people who are in the community. If you have any experiences yourself, I would love to see them commented below. And if you are looking for a new community out of Nano, if you are interested in a social media for authors, if you're interested in if you wanted to see what Nano could have been but you never got to see it, join the Myth Dimension, and I'll link the Discord below for that. Yeah, this is a mess.